robotic sound. And it's like, we got a hybrid robot.
Yeah. That's what he's got new hardware, bionic man, all that.
It's going to be a journey.
Yeah.
I told Pastor B, I said I have the technology to direct stream sound to the microphone and the processor. And they like me to do exercises that do that. So I said, you kind of say, you just want me to sit in the recliner all day and watch videos on the tablet? They said, yeah. Train your brain to the new sound.
Jane's over there thinking, I need to get me one of those. Sounds like a good deal.
I always wondered how that worked.
I was psyched up to get a hearing aid, and they said that would do you good. Hearing aid just magnifies what you're hearing, and said you're not hearing anything.
Zero times whatever is still zero.
Do they know what caused the hearing loss?
No, they don't. They haven't guessed to me.
All right, where are we at?
We are in John chapter 6. John chapter 6. Right, yeah, so it's been 3 weeks.
For 3 weeks.
Well, so have I.
Okay.
Well, for one of those, and then the other one I forgot what day it was. I had something else come up. Anyway,
that's cool.
We're finally back.
All right, John chapter 6.
John chapter 6. So, looking back at the miracles of Jesus, in some ways we're hitting a bit of a transition here for the next two miracles. The next two kind of come as a set, as a unit. They're really part of one narrative sweep. While we've had miracles kind of be back to back before, there's always been a distinction in the narrative. Jesus is traveling in between them, or something else is going on. With this one, we have Jesus feeding the 5,000 and then straight away walking on water. They are back-to-back events. Basically, nothing happens in between them. I mean, there's a few notes, and we'll pay some attention to that. But
you mean back-to-back within a 24-hour period, or just
probably less than that? So the timeline in my head, and the trick is the feeding of the 5,000 is in all four of the Gospels. It's one of the few miracles that appears in all of them. However, the timing and the sequencing of events is inconsistent. And we'll talk a little bit about that today too. But generally, my understanding, and Joe can correct me if I'm wrong, is Jesus feeds the 5,000 and teaches, and then he goes and retreats up on the mountain, tells his disciples, you go to the other side of the sea, and that evening, he sees them on the water. This is some gospel synergism.
Yeah.
He sees them on the water and goes out. So that we're talking lunch and midnight, give or take, or early in the morning or so. Well, it's still dark, so not even, kind of closer to a 12-hour window. Jesus performs these miracles. Is that your understanding? Okay, good. I always get nervous with stuff like that, right? But, so they are back-to-back immediate. And we know Jesus is doing other miracles all the time, right? So there's a few reasons why we know that Jesus is doing other miracles that we don't get in the book. One of them is one of our key questions for the class, right? Why this miracle? Because at the end of the book, John says, Jesus did a bunch of other stuff, right? But then we also get these hints, and we're going to get one in our text today, right? Why is the crowd following Jesus this time? We haven't read it yet, but it's because of the signs that he's doing. Miracles. He's healing people, and so people are following him. And so Jesus, in John at least, you get the impression Jesus is doing a lot of miracles. Of course, we don't hear about all of them. But really, at least most of the commentaries that I looked at really want us to see basically all of John chapter 6 as one important and centralized unit. Are you looking for a second chance?
Yes.
Other building. You're close. Straight across. as one centralized event where we have the feeding of the 5,000, the walking on the water, and then this bread of life discourse is what it's sometimes called, right? And John wants us to understand these all as one vignette, if you will. Now we're gonna break it apart. We're not even gonna talk about the third section, right? Because we're not doing the discourses of Jesus. We're doing the miracles. But we're really hitting these two that really are kind of two sides of the coin, at least from a narrative perspective. Additionally, we're getting a bit of a transition. We're kind of right in the middle of Jesus' miracles, right? This is miracle number 4, right? Unless I've completely lost my mind. Right. Wedding, the changing of water to wine at the wedding at Cana, and then the healing of the official's son, and then another healing, very similar sort of healing, right, of the man at the pool of Bethesda. So we've already hit our first half of the miracles in John. Now we're in the middle, right? So we're starting to, well, one, we go from some healing miracles to not healing miracles. And I understand the wedding at Cana is its own thing, right? But you have these healing or these non-healing miracles. We're going to see some more healing later. One healing even from death, and then we lead into the resurrection, right? John chapter 6. Thank you, Bill. And whenever you hit the center point, especially of kind of these Jewish style writings, it's probably important. So much so that I can tell you this. I don't remember where it is. Maybe Joe knows the exact one. But the center letter, Bill, of the Pentateuch, first 5 books of Moses, is a Vav. It's just a line. You know how I know that? It's because it's really big on the page, because they counted and they said, this is the center. And do you know where it is? Yeah, but they know that. They know that's something that was important to them. And so when we're hitting, and we've seen this in other narratives, just haven't talked quite so specifically. So in Joel, when we did Joel, we saw those two, that locust and the other thing, I can't remember, narratives kind of wound together, and in the center of the book is where they intersect, right? Jonah, we get a very similar sort of thing. It's a little bit different, but you have the first narrative, which gets you halfway through, and then the second is him in Nineveh, right, after he gets spat out, and then you have this third chunk. And these center pieces in these narrative blocks usually are things, they're little signals just to say, hey, pay attention, right? At the very beginning of the book of John, what is the point that John is making about Jesus? Right? This is before the miracle, John chapter 1.
He is the Word.
He is the Word, right? Which is code for
He's God.
He is God, and He has done what?
Creation.
He has done creation, but He has become flesh. He's tabernacling with us, right? God is with us. The first miracle, what does it entail?
Water.
Changing of the water into wine. We didn't really push down this direction because we're only getting a little taste of it, but we see this picture of the wedding feast, and Jesus begins his ministry overseeing and providing wine at a wedding. Not only does this have prophetic implications, i.e. a number of the prophets, Micah was one that we talked about last summer, where the promises of eternity include good wine, grapevines, things like that. But we're also, it's impossible to read John without pushing towards the Eucharist, without pushing towards communion. And if Jesus is, right, I remember we talked, Cyril of Alexandria pulled this up. If he can change water into wine, why can't he change wine into his blood, right? And so we're starting to get those Eucharistic communion aspects and themes throughout John. Here we are at the center of the book, or the center of the miracles at least, and what is the sign concern?
Feeding of the 5,000.
Feeding of the 5,000.
The bread.
Bread. We're going to pause on the fish, but And this is followed by the bread of life discourse. And we're going to talk about how this is kind of an allusion in two directions. It goes back to Old Testament stuff. And we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that. But it also, it's impossible to read that bread of life discourse and the feeding of the 5,000 and not see Eucharistic connections. And I am using that word on purpose instead of just communion. We'll get to why in a minute, partly because it's in the text. But that Eucharistic connection right at the center point of Jesus' ministry. Right before what is the last of Jesus' signs?
The ascension.
That's not in the book of John.
What?
But you're close. What I'm looking for here is not the raising of Lazarus, which is typically called the last of Jesus' signs. And there's reasons for that, right?
The transfiguration in John?
Is the resurrection.
Yeah.
Is the resurrection. And what I want us to do in general, I think this is helpful as a whole. I think typically we break up Holy Week in general into isolated incidents. I want us to begin thinking of it as one event. From the procession, right, Palm Sunday, through the resurrection, that is one event. Now, obviously there's lots going on, a lot. But if you start thinking of it as one event, a lot of thematic things start to kind of click into place more easily, right? Especially if you're not willing to go with me from Palm Sunday, that's fine. The death and resurrection of Jesus, think of it as one thing. Go ahead.
I'm going off of script just a little bit.
That's fine.
But in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Did Jesus tell them He's the Word? Or how did they figure this out? I even read Genesis, at the very beginning.
Yeah, okay.
So how did they figure that out?
There's the easy way to answer it, which is just, it's divinely inspired, so get over it, Jim.
Another route.
That's what the Father tells them, right?
Yeah, so there's that. Yes, so I mean that's part of it. So there's there's cultural context here.
Okay.
Because saying, in the beginning was the Word to us is weird.
Yeah.
Like that's a strange turn of phrase. For the Hellenistic world, it wasn't. Logos, which is that word.
Okay.
That was what Plato's kind of the first one that does this.
Okay.
At least the first of the big guys that does this. He talks about the Word being God, synonymous with the unmoved mover. It is the Word. And there are other words that they use for this and aspects and things like that. Wisdom is one, and that pops up in Proverbs a lot. And it predates the Greeks, right? Especially that wisdom idea. And so this really throws people off, right? Whenever Solomon is personifying wisdom in the book of Proverbs, who's he talking about? Well, the last chunk of Proverbs, right? Wisdom is that, I'm sure Karen knows, right? Wisdom is the woman and the mother, right? So who is wisdom a personification of in the book of Proverbs? I'm intentionally leading. What was that?
Mary?
No, not Mary. I'm intentionally doing
Okay.
Joan. No, it's Jesus.
Oh.
Oh, Mark.
Uh-huh.
How dare I use? Why is wisdom called a woman and it uses feminine attributes and nouns? Does anyone know?
Because woman gives birth.
No, that's not it.
Is women smarter than men?
I mean, that's true, but that's not it.
That's all I've heard.
Nope. It's far less interesting than that. You might know someone named Wisdom, in fact. Sophia. Philosophy is the love of wisdom. Philo, love. Sophia, wisdom, right? So wisdom, yes, is using female adjectives and nouns and all of that kind of stuff, but it's talking about Jesus, right? Because wisdom is this aspect that's attributed with the logos from a cultural standpoint. So part of this is code, right?
Okay.
Is code to us. Would not have been code to them. John is being ridiculously straightforward to his initial audience. Everyone he dealt with, which was the Hellenistic world, right, knew that when he said in the beginning was the Word, they're like, yeah, duh, we know that already, right? Unmoved mover, we get it. When the Word was God, they're like, come on, this is boring, we've been here, see spot, run, yep. And he goes, and the Word became flesh. And they go, oh, stop, no, absolutely not, right? That's, so where is this coming from? This is just coming from the fact of the incarnation. And does Jesus tell them that? Yes. Now, did Jesus have a little discourse with John where he said, in the beginning was me, the Word, and probably not. But to make the what John does in John chapter 1 is, in the beginning was God, the Logos. In fact, the thing that should be shocking in our culture is not necessarily that the Word was at the beginning, but I feel like culturally most of our society would associate the description that John gives of the Word to the Father, not to the Son. Again, the Greeks wouldn't have had that issue, but I think in our sense, I don't know, maybe...
How would you explain that to an unbeliever?
I wouldn't. No. I wouldn't necessarily start there. No, if I were explaining it to an unbeliever...
encouraging them to believe.
Yeah,
hard to explain.
Yeah, and I don't think you necessarily need to, but I think where this comes up, and I know that you're interested in this, Jay, there's something else you told me, is in this sense of, right, God's not far away. Like, God, out of love for his creation, became part of his creation, and became subject to his creation. And that's counterintuitive to most people, right? That's how I would approach the explanation. Unless they're a real nerd like me.
I usually avoid it like a buddy.
Yeah.
Unless they have.
No, I mean, what John's point is that true God became true man, and did it for the purpose of being the Lamb of God that takes away the sin of the world, right? And to tie this back in, not only to be the Lamb of God that takes away the sin of the world, but also to be the creator who provides for his creation, who restores that which is broken, and in that provision not only provides for the needs of the body, but also provides for the needs of the soul. And that's a lot of what is going on in our text for today.
Okay.
Good. Anything else, background stuff? Cool. Let's go, Jeff.
It's about John chapter 6. The book ends.
Yeah.
He starts with 5,000 plus people. He ends up with 12 guys who say, we don't know where else to go, we're going to follow you.
Yes, and if you're going to push it forward, a lot of the early church makes the connection to the couple thousand at Pentecost that are baptized and fed in the Spirit in that sense. So, but yeah, I mean, absolutely. And we see, in fact, I think it's in our upcoming, I think it's the gospel lesson for this week. I'm preaching on the Old Testament, so don't quote me if it's not there. But I'm pretty sure in our gospel reading, Jesus is telling the disciples to forgive. I think this is a forgiveness one. I'm not 100% sure. Anyway, Jesus tells his disciples some of the teachings, and their response is, then who can be saved? We can't do this. This is a hard teaching. We're done, right? And what happens in a lot of Jesus, a pretty common thing that happens, the sine wave, if you will, is no one's following Jesus. Jesus does miraculous signs. Everyone's following Jesus. Jesus scares the daylights out of them by telling them to do the things that he's always been telling them to do, and they, not all, many melt away. And then we see this in large scale with the cross, where, if you're really going to get down to it, how many faithful followers of Jesus stuck with him through the crucifixion?
One.
Who's the one?
John.
John is the one disciple that sticks
Oh.
by Jesus' side that we know, right?
Mary.
And like 4 women. And that is John and, well, 3 women.
Yeah,
Mary,
most
Mary.
of them named Mary.
Right, yeah. Mary, and Salome, right? That's kind of it. That stick with Jesus even through the crucifixion. Now, John still ran away in the Garden of Gethsemane. Like, don't get me wrong. And we also don't know. Thaddeus might have been at the cross too. He just doesn't get mentioned. But we know for sure, right? There's at least 4. Some women and John. We know that they stick by Jesus. But that's it.
So what makes you think Thaddeus may have been there?
It just
Is
an
it
argument.
somewhere?
No, it's,
Oh.
Thaddeus is one of the funny names for the disciples, and so I usually pick him up because he's
Oh, okay.
mentioned like once. And it's an argument from silence,
That's cool.
technically, to say none of the other disciples were there. So, well, we know Peter was in the courtyard for at least a while, so it's not unlikely that some of the disciples kind of were at least watching from the sidelines. We know for certain they get called out, John and the handful of women. Well, I guess, in thinking through, that's not entirely true either. We have Joseph of Arimathea who gives him his tomb. So there's probably at least some level of connection there. And most of the disciples aren't like gone. They're just, I'm not going to be near Jesus right now. It's sort of the situation. Of course, one of the things that we recognize, we don't get to see it play out most of the time, but you see a whole bunch of, in this case, men who were more than ready to tuck tail, run, dive for cover, get out of Dodge, who, a decade or 2 later aren't doing that anymore. And the faith changed these men, for sure.
I don't want to change the subject.
That's
If this
fine.
can be answered quickly, but
No,
it just dawned on me straight. Who was Mark? I mean, he wasn't. One of the-
Yes.
I mean, have they also referred to him as John Mark? Is that? I mean,
Joe, help me.
who was Mark?
The problem is there's more than one Mark.
The Mark we think wrote the gospel comes up later. He joins Barnabas and Paul on some of their missionary
After
work.
Jesus had already been crucified?
And after his resurrection.
Okay,
after
all right,
Paul
so he
became a
wasn't around,
Christian.
all right.
We hear about him in the book of Acts.
Yeah.
And later on, he gets associated with Peter by tradition, and so his gospel is usually described as the Mark's remembrance of the gospel that Peter preached. The one little self-portrait that some see him, including himself in the gospel, is it may have been in his parents' house where the upper room was. And so when the disciples went out, there's this young guy who follows them along and is there in the garden with the disciples when Jesus gets arrested, and they go to nab him too, and he pulls out of he's in his good Elizabethan English perspective, his nightshirt,
Yeah.
and runs away naked. And some have said that was Mark.
Yeah. There is a very small tradition. I'm part of it, but it's almost certainly not the correct tradition, but I like it too much. That I think Mark is in the Gospel of Mark twice. Again, I am in the minority. I'm probably wrong, but I heard it. I know that some early church guys kind of thought it was possible, and I like it enough. Why not, right? It goes something like this. The rich young man who comes to Jesus and says, I've done everything, that's Mark. And he says, well, you lack one thing. Go sell everything you have and give it to the poor. And the theory is he did. And this sounds really crazy in modern context. And he was just some naked dude that was following Jesus around because Jesus said sell everything and he took him seriously. And so it's less that they nabbed his shirt, just he's a naked guy running around. Which, yes, that sounds like Jay's face.
Yeah.
That sounds completely insane.
Yes.
Those are your modern sensibilities. The ancient world was way more interesting than you all give it credit
Well,
for.
it's possible.
Right. Now, again, I think it's unlikely. But this whole thing, who is it? One of the major prophets is running around naked for a while. I can never remember which one it is. It's either Isaiah or Jeremiah. Anyway.
I want to say it's Jeremiah.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of these guys. And I heard someone talking recently, they're like, oh, well, I asked a question about that. And they said, well, he was probably in a loincloth. I'm like, maybe. But this is the ancient world. They did stuff like this. They didn't have the same Victorian sensibilities we do. I'm not advocating to bring these things back, by the way. One last thing, and then we'll get back onto it. The church I grew up in, we had something every year. It's called the Walk Through Bethlehem. And it's a huge production. We had like 20 vignettes set up of the Christmas story. And over time it got added to. I was Gabriel a few years. I was a shepherd. I was someone in the marketplace hawking random crap on people. It was wonderful. It was a blast. By the way, I was Herod's scribe, and my pastor, the one who was here, did the Luther thing. He screamed at me as Herod. And I'd be shocked every time, over and over and over. But I was the scribe, and I was Gabriel. You know why? Because I had my script. I didn't remember anything. Anyway, the joke was that they were going to add, because they did have a cross scene at the end, and the head pastor would talk and stuff like that. The joke was that they were going to add a Gethsemane scene, and that the vicar would have to be the naked guy running away. But anyway, so let's get into this text. I have a volunteer to read. First 5 verses. We'll just break it all up, although we'll probably just read the whole thing all in one go.
Starting in
Chapter 6, verse 1.
Yeah. After this, Jesus went away to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias. And a large crowd was following him because they saw the signs that he was doing on the sick. Jesus went up on the mountain, and there he sat down with his disciples. Now the Passover, the feast of the Jews, was at hand. Lifting up his eyes then, and seeing that a large crowd was coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread so that these people may eat?"
All right, we're going to pause here just for some commentary, and then like I said, we'll just keep reading. One, we're not going to dive too deeply into this because it's not terribly relevant, but it's worth knowing. We have a chronology issue here, which is that Jesus in chapter 5 is on the side of the Sea of Galilee that he crosses to in chapter 6. And so something is amiss here. We don't really know what it is. There's a couple of options. Some people say, well, Jesus had fled this side because of pressure from the Pharisees, and he had a trip to the other side, and it's just not talked about. It's yada yada over. My theory is that this is not a chronology, it's a thematic thing. It's just talking about something that happened, and so I just ignore that problem entirely. So Jesus goes, if you're going to be real strict in John, Jesus goes from one side of the lake, crosses it, and ends up where he started, or at least where we last saw him. So something has happened, something's going on here. So there's that. Why are the crowds following him?
Hearing him sick.
Yeah.
They've seen all the miracles.
You're right, they're seeing him heal the sick, do the miracles. Don't be weirded out by the preposition, by the way. The signs that he was doing on the sick, right? That's a weird turn of phrase. As my Greek professor once said, prepositions are always up for grabs. So make that whatever preposition you want, because prepositions in Greek don't work like they do in English anyway. So I don't know why it's on. Well, I do. It's because of the case, I assume. Okay.
Genitive.
Don't get weirded out. It's just he's healing the sick, right? What's the problem that he identifies?
No bread.
Where?
Where were you to buy it?
Yeah. So this is different. We mentioned that this miracle is in all four of the Gospels. It's one of the few things that is in each and every one of the Gospels. In John, uniquely, it's Jesus who brings up the problem. In the other Gospels, it's someone else coming up to Jesus and saying, and it's usually Philip, Jesus, tell them to go home. We don't have the stuff to feed them with, right? But here, that's not the order. Jesus is the one who says, he goes to Philip, there's a bunch of people, where are we? And the question's different, right? It's not how are we going to feed them, it's where are we buying bread for these people. Right? When did this take place?
This was late in the afternoon.
In the year. So I mean, that's fine.
Passover.
The Passover. This is also a unique detail to John. So, what are we to do with this? Well, again, there's kind of the two options. One is John's just the only one who brings it up. And if it is, there's some notable things about this. Where should Jesus be if it's the Passover? In Jerusalem. That's why he goes to Jerusalem the next time, right? By the way, if he is here in the Passover, the next Passover is in the upper room. The next Passover is his passion, right? So whether it's true chronology or if it's thematically laid out, John is pulling that connection. The other option is that this isn't necessarily a chronology thing. John is bringing this Passover aspect into it for reasons of driving home the point of what Jesus is trying to show us. Part of that is looking forward to the new Passover that he brings, right? Part of it is looking back. What do you think it's looking back to? This is an easier question than you think it is.
First Passover?
The Passover, right? And we'll draw those connections. I personally, and you guys know how I feel, again, in the minority, I think Jesus had one Passover in his ministry. I'm in the minority. I get it. That's fine. I'm probably wrong. But I like the thematic understanding here because if we understand it to be thematic, whether it's chronological or not, we are seeing Jesus taking Old Testament stuff, showing how it's all about him, talking in the Bread of Life discourse, saying, hey, it's all about me. It always has been. Moses is talking about me. I just showed you that. And then we're pushing forward to the new Passover, right? That new covenant that you and I talked about earlier today. We talked a little bit about this kind of stuff in our podcast that's going to come out
Weeks.
No, it might be months at this point, just because we still got Didache to get through. This is on the next book. Anyway, and so to me that seems pretty fitting here. All right, so it's during the Passover. What do you need for the Passover? But what don't you need for the Passover? This is a weird way to ask the question. Joe, help him out.
Leaven.
Yeah, no yeast, right? This might be a factor in what comes up, but let's keep going here. Volunteer for 6 through 10.
Well, it said, I don't have any money, do you? No.
6. So he said this to test him.
He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread would not be enough for each of them to get load. One of his disciples, Andrew, son of Peter's brother, said to him, there is a boy here who has barely 5 loaves and 2 fish, but what are they for so many? Jesus said, have the people sit down. Now there was much bread in the place, so the men sat down, about 5,000 men were.
All right. So one, you gotta love this, right? Jesus knows what he's gonna do. And we see John saying this kind of thing a number of times. The one that comes into my mind is with Lazarus. I pray not because I right, I know you hear me, but let's make sure everyone else knows what's going on. John really seems to be laying this on Jesus. How many of you have heard something along these lines, that Jesus was kind of stuck in the path that he was going? He was a victim of fate and the will of the Father. He didn't really have a choice in the matter. He may not have really even known what he had gotten himself into with the whole crucifixion thing. Anyone ever heard that before? Anyone ever seen Jesus Christ Superstar? Then you've heard this before, because that's what the whole song in the Garden of Gethsemane is about, which is why you just skip it, right? This is not about this at all, but I love it, so I'm going to bring it up every time I get a chance. There's a paraphrase of the Bible, right? We know the difference between a paraphrase and a translation, right? Translation takes, you know what I'm going to talk about, don't you?
The Living Bible.
No, yeah. So a translation takes the words and translates them. A paraphrase takes the meaning and attempts to write the meaning in modern sensibilities. The most famous one of these, I mean, that's one of them. The Message was huge a while ago. Message is not a translation of the Bible, and don't read it, it's bad. There's a paraphrase of the Bible that is very, very old. It was used to help convert the Germans. In fact, Luther had one on his desk as he was translating the Bible into German, not to help him with what words to use, but to help him with common German vernacular and turns of phrase. It's called the Helliand, or the Saxon Gospel. It is the gospel story written for Vikings, basically. And it takes some liberties with things.
Yeah.
Oh, so we all know, right? It's my favorite scene. I've not read the whole thing, but I've read enough. And the absolute best is the arrest of Jesus, right? So Jesus is there with his mighty thanes, right? Not disciples, they're thanes. And he is standing as the betrayer with those terrible people. Judas comes forward and challenges Jesus. And Peter cries out to Jesus, "Step back, Lord, for I shall fell them all with my mighty blade." And, and Jesus says no, and we'll get to why he says no in a minute. And then one of the warriors from among the traitorous mob leaps forward to take the life of Christ in that very moment. But with great passion and bravery, the mighty thane Peter cleaves him in two. This is Malchus getting his ear cut off, but it's the Viking version. And then Jesus pastes them back together and says no. And the thing is, you can't tell Vikings that Jesus died willingly, because they're not going to be about that. So Jesus is bound by fate. He doesn't have a choice. And that really resonated with Vikings, because they're all about that kind of stuff, right?
Destiny.
Yeah, it's destiny. You can't escape it, kind of thing. John wants us to be very clear. That is not what's happening. Jesus knows exactly what's going on the whole time, right? He is very much in control of all of these things. By the way, Charles Martel, this is Charlemagne's father or grandfather, I can't remember. He was converted, and there's a great similar story, and then we'll get back to the text here. As the missionaries reading him the Gospels, they also get to this point where Jesus is arrested, and he, apparently the king, right, stood up in a huff, grabbed onto his weapons, and said, "Had I and my mighty Franks been there, the Lord would not have been taken. We would have killed them all." And it's like, you're wrong. That's not the point, but you got your heart's in the right place, Charles, right? But that's what happens when you name someone the Hammer. Anyway, that whole weird early middle age time frame is wild, right? You had to have a red beard because your grandmother was a mermaid, all that kind of stuff. Good. Anyway, Jesus knows what's going on. This is not a surprise to him. What's Peter's not Peter? Philip. Started with the P. What's Philip's response to this?
Half you sound right.
Yeah. I want you to hear both of these responses. As you get two, hear them with sarcasm as the tone, right? Because I think we always see them the disciples, right? Because they never had their hands not like this, and they're, with the halos and the glow and all of that.
Yeah.
Philip says, buddy, Elon Musk would struggle to feed these people, right? Right? I worked for a year, I still would give them some crumbs. And then, who is it, Andrew? Yeah, Andrew goes, oh, I got it. There's a kid here with some loaves of barley bread and some fish. Maybe everyone can have a crumb, right? That is, I think, how we should be reading these responses. Just say, yeah, kind of like, Jesus, there's no way to feed these people, right? It's absurd. So kind of that absurd sarcasm. I don't know it. I know that they weren't doing this, right? My guess is that's how I'd be more likely. You know what? Actually, what I would do is if Jesus said, where will you go to buy this? I would say, Lord, I don't know, but I'm taking Jay's credit card.
What number miracle was that?
What was this?
What number miracle?
Which one? Which one?
The one we're talking about.
4.
4.
Yes, 4. This is the 4th. Yeah, I'll let the Lutheran Church Extension Fund. They'll bankroll this.
But they were with Jesus at the wedding and the other miracles.
Yeah, but
I mean, I get it. But
they're still seeing this as something that's not possible. But what would an answer of knowing faith have been? I'm not saying these guys didn't have faith, right? What would the answer? We'll do this. Jesus is in the rabbinic tradition. He's fishing for an answer here. That's also kind of what Jesus knew what he was going to do. So what is Jesus trying to get them to come to when he says, where will you buy the bread? What's the correct answer to Jesus here?
Jesus will provide.
Yeah. But how should they know that?
Has the Lord's Prayer been announced yet?
Yes.
It's the basis of the Lord's Prayer.
Right.
They could think back to the wedding of Cana.
No, you almost had it. Cana has 3 of the correct letters in 3 of the correct places. The first letter is the one that's wrong here. There is something that Jesus is trying to get them to understand here. And I'll tell you this, when I read it in the commentaries, I'm like, okay, you're stretching a little bit. I'm now convinced. So I'm going to convince you. Joe, I know that you know because of that comment.
You talked about the Eucharist a lot earlier.
But where does God provide bread for a real mass of people out where
The
Manna, right?
Yeah.
So,
The rock or whatever.
right, this is, and I can feel sympathetic to Jesus here, right? He's asking
The
them.
disciples wouldn't have known about that manna thing.
Of course they would have.
They were Jewish. They
Yeah.
heard the story of
Jay, they had the Pentateuch memorized for sure, and they probably had the rest of the Bible memorized.
Okay.
Yeah, we have this. It just drives me nuts. And again, I went on a rant in a different direction of the podcast. Yes, I mean we have this sense that it's like, oh, well, Jesus picked common people who didn't really know very much, right? And yes, he picked common people, but what people don't realize because they weren't paying enough attention to my intertestamental history class is Israel had publicly funded education at this point, for universal, including for women. It was not provided by the Romans. It had been going for 80 plus years. It was established by the female Hasmonean person whose name has escaped me. You gave me a coin from that dynasty, the Hasmoneans. It wasn't her, it was her father, I think. Anyway, it's Greek. I don't think it's Cleopatra. Anyway, she established universal education, right? What we would kind of consider as elementary school. Plus, part of the right of becoming a man or an adult in general in this society meant literacy. The disciples knew how to read and write. We see them doing it, right? And it's not that uncommon, at least to be capable of it, right? Mm-hmm. What was Jesus' dad, earthly father? He's a carpenter. And when Jesus goes and throws the Isaiah scroll open and starts reading from it, they all go, how did the carpenter's son learn how to read? No, like, okay, he's reading, right? It's just like when you see Liam reading in church, you're like, oh, yeah, he can read. Of course he can, right?
That's where he went to school.
Right, yeah. I mean, so
It's synagogue.
again, this is one of these things that really frustrates me, and it's from bad preaching. These guys are trying to get object lessons. This sense of the disciples were uneducated or didn't know their Old Testament. We talked about this earlier today on the podcast. I'll give you a little sneak peek. When the disciples on the Mountain of Ascension say, hey, Jesus, is now the time that you're going to establish your kingdom? And all the preachers say, oh, what a bunch of dummies, right? No, they have a better understanding of the prophets than you do if you think that they're dumb for asking that. Because what do the prophets always say, without exception, that the Messiah will do after he accomplishes all of his other work? Is establish his earthly reign and restore the world, right? And so the disciples, having memorized the prophets, or at least very close to it, go down the checklist and are like, Jesus, you got stuff to do. There's only one thing left, so we're going to do it now. And then Jesus goes, no, there's something you don't know about. And we go, there's a 2,000 plus year gap in between these things? What? Prophets had no concept of this. They don't see that, right? The disciples knew their stuff. These were smart guys, right? And we know this, right? We start looking at like the Council of Jerusalem, if you want to call it that. Who are the people making all these decisions and theological statements and arguments for the early church? It's the disciples. They're not idiots. They know what they're doing, right? So yes, the disciples. Now, should they have necessarily immediately made that connection? That might be a bit of a stretch, especially because what I do also think is important for us to understand is that Christological truths are actively hidden from the disciples by the Holy Spirit and by all people. Or the Holy Spirit hides some of the truth of who Jesus is from the people of his day. They are not allowed to know certain things, which is why I think the disciples are, other than the fact that they're human, so I think they're so wishy-washy sometimes. Like, I saw you turn water into wine. I know what happened there, but you can't feed these people, right? Well, first of all, they don't know that he can necessarily. But where I get this, the sense that the Holy Spirit hides stuff about Jesus is, one, I think if the world had any concept of who Jesus was, they wouldn't have killed him, which is a problem if you need to be the sacrifice, right? And this is Road to Emmaus stuff, where Jesus says, okay, he opens the scriptures up to them. He removes that barrier to true, deep understanding. So yeah, the disciples do get a crash course before Jesus leaves. They already knew a lot of this stuff, right? So we're going to say that Jesus, the answer to this is you don't buy the bread, God provides the bread. That, at the very least, that should have been something that they connected with. But hey, we got some barley bread. Likely it's barley bread because that's something you ate during Passover. That's a connection in the detail there. And then there's 2 fish, and let me tell you, the early church went crazy with this, right? The 5 barley loaves are the 5 books of Moses, and the 2 fish are insert New Testament dualities, the 2 natures in Christ, whatever it is. And this is what they have, I think. All right, volunteer for 11 to 14.
All right. Jesus then took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated. So also the fish, as much as they wanted. And when they had eaten their fill, he told his disciples, "Gather up the leftover fragments, that nothing may be lost." So they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten. When the people saw the sign that he had done, they said, "This is indeed the prophet who is coming to the world."
All right, so here we have the miracle. By the way, I'm going to just float this out there. because it came into my mind. We see that Jesus divides the bread, and we'll talk about that in a more meaningful sense in just a minute here. And then so also the fish, right? Was Jesus breaking fish up? And if so, how many fish heads were there at the end of this? I've never thought about this until today. Was it like, they pulled off a bit of fish and then there was just more there? Was it an ever-expanding fish? I mean, the bread, I don't know. I guess the same thing with the bread. Anyway, I never... And do we have an answer? No.
They must have eaten it raw.
Well, maybe they didn't, right? I mean, maybe there's smoke. Maybe it's sushi. Who knows, right?
Who knows?
That's not really that's not the point, right?
No.
But it's just, I don't know. It just popped into my brain today. Is the mechanics of this. I wonder how many fish heads there were when they were done. Also, despite what every little picture that you color in Sunday school, they don't pick up the fish. They just pick up the bread, so there's, no matter what, there's no fish heads and tails sticking out of the baskets. Anyway. But let's get to some more meaningful stuff here. So there are two words here that we want to spend a little bit of time on dealing with. And one of them I'm not even going to try to pronounce. I wrote it down here. It's a nightmare. The first here is, Jesus said to people, take down. There we go, verse 11. Then Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, by the way, what does that sound like?
Eucharist.
The give thanks, the word in the text here in Greek is Eucharisto, which is the Greek word for the giving of thanks, right? This is where we get the name Eucharist from for communion, right? Why? Where else is it? I mean, yes, this is part of the communion liturgy, right? Except it sounds a little bit different. It's not when he had been given the loaves, right? It's on the night in which he was betrayed. He took bread, and after he had given thanks, it's the same line. It's the same words that Jesus speaks here on Passover as he's dividing bread and giving it to everyone to provide for them. Just as the manna of old. By the way, the manna one is the nightmare of a Greek word. Where is it? There we go. Same verse. So also the fish, as much as they wanted, that filling word. All right. I have it in English here, which is probably going to make it worse. Ene plasthon son. How did I do, Joe? Mm-hmm. Okay. Greek, the way they mash consonants together, sometimes it's just awful, right? They were filled up. This is the same word that's used in the account of the manna in the Septuagint of the Old Testament. It's that same verb, that same form gets used. And so it seems that John is trying to pull this connection with these two significant terms, the Passover and everything, to one, looking back to the one who provided bread from heaven, and the one who provides bread from heaven for the church. All of it being in the person of Christ, right? And by the way, I'm using the term bread from heaven because that's the bread of life discourse. That's what Jesus does. And he makes it very clear that your fathers ate the manna in the desert. I am the bread from heaven, right? Whoever eats of me is never hungry, right? And so Jesus will, in the continuation of this narrative, make this very clear that this is who he is. And by the way, there are a number of Exodus parallels to this text. So, for instance, there's the crossing of the sea. That first detail, Jesus crossed the sea, so did Moses, right? Jesus is the equivalent of Moses here, right? The people follow after seeing signs. See Moses do signs, they follow him. Jesus goes up the mountain. I don't know how clear, verse 3, Jesus went up on the mountain. It's not a mountain. There are no mountains in this area. It's a hill. Like, realistically, it's a hillside. Yet, John uses the word for mountain. There's connections to the Exodus there, Sinai kind of language. The people don't have food. Now, they don't complain about that here.
Right.
Jesus heads it off, but I think it's worth noting Was God aware of the lack of food before the people complained about it? Bread from heaven then is given to them in abundance so that they can eat and be filled. And they have enough left over to collect. This is the connection for the Sabbath, right? They were to collect it so that it did not go to waste. Now, of course, you don't collect extra on the rest of the days because then it went bad, but that's a whole different story. And so there are some commenters that go so far as to say that this whole unit is a commentary that Jesus is giving on what the manna of the Old Testament was actually about, including this miracle, particularly with the bread aspect of this. We'll pause here for questions.
In my Lutheran Study Bible here, it says the prophet, and then it says people thought that he was the new Moses.
Yeah, so right at the end there. This is indeed the prophet who is to come into the world. So they are identifying him as the new Moses. This is significant, right?
You would think he wasn't just a prophet, he was the
That's what they're
prophet.
saying. That's what they're saying.
But how
He
did
is
they get
the-
from the prophet to Moses?
Who knows? That's not Joe, because I know Joe knows.
Interesting.
What was your question?
Why does Lutheran Study Bible say, when they say, right, this is indeed the prophet who is coming into the world, how does the Lutheran Study Bible know, correctly so, that they think he's the new Moses? Why is it talking about Moses?
Oh, they send you back to Deuteronomy.
Ooh, that's good. That's the correct book.
What's in Deuteronomy?
Oh, that makes sense.
So in Deuteronomy, Deuteronomy, by the way, the easiest way to remember what's going on there is that Moses is giving his last sermon. He talks about everything that's happened, and he gives directions to the people as they're going forward, right? Because how long has Moses been leading them? For 42 years he's been leading them, right? A year to Sinai, a year from Sinai to Cana, and then 40 more years because they got scared, right? Moses has been leading them for 42 years, and he's about to disappear. Not only was Moses leading them for that long, but he's the one that brought them out of Egypt, right? Not only that, but anytime anyone tried to, right, use a modern phrase for you right here, anytime anyone tried to step to Moses, they died. Either in the moment, like Korah, when God was very subtle by having the earth eat the people who were trying to overthrow Moses. It's on the side of what you read, Jay. You should know that. Korah's rebellion. Where God has the earth eat people who try to overthrow Moses, to Miriam and Aaron being told, you're done. You don't get to go in because you tried to usurp Moses' authority, right? And now he's about to die. And he knows he's about to die. So I'm about to go up the mountain, you'll never see me again. And so the people are freaking out, right? And remember, the people he's talking to, with two exceptions, well, slightly more than that, but with basically two exceptions, no one here knew anything but Moses leading the people, right? What was the cutoff? Do you guys remember? Anyone who was not a child during the crossing of the Red Sea was dead. That was God's cutoff. So, and when they say child, they mean like Judah probably would not have met that cutoff, but by maybe. So we're talking really young. So there were some people who maybe had some vague memory of the Exodus. Obviously, Caleb and Joshua, they're good, right? They remember. Other than that, everyone who's listening to Moses has known nothing but life in the wilderness. Period. That's where they were born. And they've lived up until they're 40 in the wilderness. And so they're freaking out. And so Moses, among many other things, says, okay, who should you be looking for? This is a messianic prophecy that he gives. You have it?
Yeah, it says, the Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among you.
Oh.
Yeah, keep going.
It is to him you shall listen, just as you desired the Lord your God at Horeb on the day of the assembly. And so he's basically, I guess he's saying, they're going to have a lot of prophets, but
Yeah, so they're to look for the one.
it's
And
going to be different.
it must be a little bit further down. They say, how do we know who the prophet is? And the answer is, the first guy that's greater than me. That's the one. The first prophet greater than Moses, that is the one to look for. And who is the first prophet greater than Moses? Who takes over for Moses to lead the people? Takes the mantle that Moses gives? Oh, you nailed it. It is Joshua. Jay's looking confused. Jay, why are you confused?
No, I didn't know Joshua.
You Hellenizer.
I just thought he was a warmonger.
No. So in the Old Testament, the successor to Moses is Joshua,
I knew that.
right? Now that's an English name off of the Hebrew name, Yeshua. Jesus is a Greek name based off of the Hebrew name, Yeshua.
Well, I heard
Jesus and Joshua are the same name.
I heard something.
And so the prophet who takes over for Moses is Joshua, but it's not the guy that walked around Jericho, right? There's a parallel there,
Yeah.
and Joshua is the one that leads them into the promised land, just as Jesus, the true Joshua, leads them into the Holy Land, right? Yeshua means Yahweh saves. Real subtle foreshadowing there, if you will. And so when they're saying, this is the prophet, the crowds actually kind of get what Jesus is doing here, right? Here's someone who gave us bread from heaven, just like Moses did. And he's doing all these other things, right? This is the one. This is the guy. This is the prophet. And they get it. The multitude, the 5,000 plus people here, they have a proper understanding of who Jesus is. And what happens? The next verse. Perceiving then that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, Jesus withdrew again to the mountain by himself. So we have, this is supposed to be my conclusion, we got 25 more minutes to talk about random stuff. We have two reactions that people have, basically, when Jesus performs a miracle in the book of John. One is faith, right? That's good. That's not quite what I'm looking for here. One follow-up, if you will. We'll do it this way. We won't have to be so pedantic. There are three options when you see Jesus performing these miracles. The first is what the disciples do, what the official does, even what the man at the pool of Bethesda does. That is to follow Jesus, right? You literally are just faith, right? The second option is how the Pharisees react to Jesus, which is, what do the Pharisees want to do to Jesus? Got to kill him. We got to get rid of him, right? What's the third option? Well, you recognize who he is and say, this man's got to be king. Which of these are problematic? We'll ask it the opposite way.
Yeah.
Which is the good option, if you will? The correct option for how to respond to the miracles of Jesus?
Faith.
Yeah, the first one, the thing that the disciples are doing, following him in faith. Good. What about either of the other two? Was the correct reaction to crucify Jesus? No. Is the correct reaction to recognize him as the true second Moses who is to come, the Messiah, and want to make him king? No. That is just as problematic for Jesus and his ministry as the Pharisees, right? And in some ways, the Pharisees are more useful to Jesus because he came here to die. So at least they share that common goal. Right? It's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek way of putting it. Because what happens? Jesus says, oh, they know who I am. They're recognizing who I am. And they want to make me king. And what does Jesus do? Get out of Dodge. Peace. Right? goes up, hides on a mountain alone, doesn't even let his disciples come and follow him. Presumably they're given instructions by Jesus before he pieces out, because he says, get in the boat, start rowing. I'll meet you over there. He disappears, right? There is another one of these kind of insights that I had, and I don't want to push it too far because it doesn't actually say this, but this is not the first time that people have tried to grab Jesus, and Jesus hasn't let them. This, throughout the Gospels, from what I can understand, because maybe I'm wrong, because I didn't even think about this until I read this today. The two are, the first, when Jesus makes the supreme mistake of saying that his gospel is for Gentiles as well, right? We remember this. This one's the one that drives me nuts. The Isaiah scroll that I referenced earlier, Jesus reads it, says, I'm the Messiah. And how does everyone in his hometown react?
Okay at first.
Not even okay. They're like,
Yeah.
3 cheers for the hometown boy, right? They're thrilled. And then Jesus goes and uses some pretty incendiary examples, right? And Naaman got healed, but no Israelites, there were plenty of lepers. And only the widow at Zarephath, another Gentile, was fed when there were plenty of starving widows in Israel. And then the hometown goes, you, Cliff, let's go. And because they're like, that ain't how this works, Jesus. And they want to grab him, throw him off the cliff. And he just goes, right? And I don't know if I mentioned this, but Pastor Jordan and I, this is one of our theological disagreements. I don't know if you know this, we don't agree on everything. I'm under the impression that Jesus just like flat out walked out and he just like disappeared, basically. Pastor Jordan is under the impression that they were trying to grab him, but they couldn't get a grip, sort of thing. I don't know which is true. They both end the same way. The second time they try and kill Jesus, what does he have the nerve to say? You guys remember that one? Talking about Abraham.
Oh, I am.
Yeah, Jesus has the nerve to say, you're 40, you're 30 years old, and you think you're greater than Abraham? And he goes, well, before Abraham was ego eimi, which is not just like the English. We say, I am, and it's not dissimilar to the saying, Adonai. Like, I am is not really the divine name. It's close. In fact, did you guys know this? I know he did. I got nailed in seminary. In Hebrew, it's not I am. It doesn't say that. It says I will be who I will be. They do it on purpose because I know you get to that point in the text and you're so tired of translating. You're like, I know this one. I am who I am. And I'm like, no, it's I will be who I will be. Anyway, really frustrating. There's no present tense in Hebrew. Anyway. But Jesus says ego eimi, which is the way the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Old Testament, that is how they translate the vocable Yahweh. So it is Jesus saying, before Abraham was Yahweh. And they know that that's what he's saying, and so they say they want to kill him.
Well, I'm going back to the I am thing. I mean, as an outsider looking in, he had to know he was looking crazy.
Oh, Jesus?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why would he approach it in that manner? And if everyone's going to look at him like, who are you?
Well, so part of it is Jesus is teaching them and they don't like what he's saying. And he's, in essence, a lot of these sorts of circumstances, especially with the I am one, I don't remember the exact context that leads up to it, but I think that one's a Sabbath issue, right? Or
It comes out of the whole argument that happened after the healing.
yeah, and so like this is not a friendly crowd. The hometown, that one was friendly, and he turned it on them by saying, "Hey, I'm here for the Gentiles too," and they didn't like that. The other one that before Abraham was I am, that one was hostile to begin with. They were going after Jesus, right? And
also, they know the Old Testament.
oh, you're right, but
to Moses, tell them.
But another thing we talked about, you guys just need to listen to today's episode. So in 6 months when it comes out, it'll be set. They have a false understanding of what the Old Testament is teaching. what the Old Testament is teaching is Christ. I'm going to share it because it blew my mind, and we talked about it today, and I found it fascinating. So we're reading through and discussing the Epistle of Barnabas. We are both convinced that this is the Barnabas in the book of Acts that wrote it. So that's about when we're talking. So even if it wasn't him, it's old enough that it could have been him, right? He's talking about the Mosaic covenant very briefly as he's about to just go into this massive argument about the Christology of the Old Testament, basically, where he brings up, like, birds, and it gets weird. But we're not there yet. And he makes this really interesting claim. I think he's right. How long did the Mosaic covenant last? Right. So when did it start? When did the Mosaic covenant begin? There's a few answers I will accept.
The burning bush.
You could say it was even as early as the burning bush. That's when God makes that promise to say, right? By the way, this is so good. When Moses questions God, right? It says, basically, how do I know you are who you say you are, right? And what does God say? This is crazy. What's the proof that Moses gets that he's talking to God?
Is that where he told him to put his hand in?
No, that's what he is to say to the other people. This is wild to me, and it works, and I don't understand how it worked. I would have been like, that's no good. He says, this is how you'll know I am who I am. You'll worship me on this mountain. Like, with the people of Israel. He's on Mount Sinai when this happens, right? The proof doesn't happen until after the Exodus. Anyway, I've always thought that Moses' response to that is, okay, I need something up front, big guy. Like, you're asking for a lot for me to find out after the fact, right? But anyway, so yeah, you could say, absolutely, that's one of these moments that the Mosaic covenant begins at the burning bush, because that's when God makes these promises. Jay, you Googled it. What'd you come up with?
I couldn't find it. There was nothing in AI.
When does God? Oh man, that's pretty bad.
Yeah.
When does God give the covenant to the Israelites? Mount Sinai. Thank you. The two tablets, all that kind of stuff, right? When does that covenant end? Because we know it's over. Paul talks about how it's over, right? That's in the Bible, right?
When Jesus was born.
See, I would have, until like a week or two ago, I would have said something along that, or maybe on the cross, right? But that's not what Barnabas says. What was the physical sign of the covenant between Moses and God and the Israelites? Not the Abrahamic covenant, that one's circumcision. What is the thing that you could look to that was, this is the testament of the promise?
The ark.
No, that's...
Well, that's the reason why it was in the ark.
You meant the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah.
That makes more sense. I'm like, no, that thing's gone. Okay.
Not Noah's ark.
Thank you. Thank you, both of you. Okay. Like, I don't know how you got onto Noah here, but okay. The Ark of the Covenant, you're very, very close. But no, not the Ark of the Covenant.
Why it was called the ark.
The temple?
Not the temples. That's way later. Not the tabernacle either.
Yeah.
No. Well, what were the three things inside of the Ark of the Covenant?
The manna,
Manna? Good.
broken tablets, and Aaron's blooded rod.
There you go. Which of those three is the mark of the covenant between God and the Israelites of the Exodus? The commandments. What happened to those?
We got smashed.
How long did it take before Moses smashed the old covenant?
Oh.
This is the point Barnabas makes, and it blew my mind. Moses didn't even get off of the mountain.
By the time he got down,
He wasn't even there. Right? He didn't even get all the way down, right? There's something going on around on TikTok now, because I'm on TikTok. And it's talking about the Prince of Egypt, right? You guys ever watch that movie? It's so good.
I love it.
I show it to the confirmands every year at the lock-in. The last scene, and it's a really good scene, it's this massive climactic moment. You see Moses with the tablets, and he's walking down with the staff, and you see all of Israel out, and then it cuts, and everyone's like, it's really depressing because you know why they had to cut it there. There's a golden calf down there too. They don't. That's behind Moses' shoulder. We don't get to see that in the movie, but like that's the reality. Barnabas's point, and again, I think he's right, is that the Mosaic covenant ends when the mark of the covenant is destroyed. That proof, which is the stone tablets that Moses smashes before he even gets down. Now, and Barnabas is very. Why does he do that? Why does Moses smash the covenant?
It's all right.
Well, yes. Yes. Well, it's because, according to Barnabas, he knows that the true covenant is with Christ. And he's preparing to usher that in. And it's not a covenant of works, it's a covenant of faith. And this is how, again, and then Barnabas will take almost the rest of his letter to explain how the entire Old Testament is really just about Jesus. I tell you that all the time. This guy, again, he tells you why the birds are about the different parts of Jesus. I'm really stuck on this bird thing. It's a weird, anyway.
He's writing while they're still doing sacrifices in the temple.
They're still going on.
He's that old.
There might be, depending on the dating, he might be writing right after they technically stopped because the Romans smashed the temple. That might have been the occasion for him to write. But that system is still going, even if the temple had been interrupted at that point. That's how old. Yeah, that's how old he is. This book is, and what he's doing, and why it came up here is Jesus is showing the people. Oh, this is the prophet thing, right? He is the prophet that's always been promised. This has always been the plan. Right, now did Moses, as he's smashing the tablets, go, yes, now the covenant of the law is put to death so that the new covenant of Christ in his atoning, but no. But this is some of that prophetic stuff, and ancient people like Barnabas would have said, even if Moses didn't know that he was prophesying this, he was in that action. And that's why it's included, is so that we, looking back, can look at it and say, look, here is Christ.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, and I will say, early church, especially the really early church, does a lot of this, and oftentimes it's really good. Sometimes it can go really off the rails, and sometimes it can get just weird. One of the places that I've mentioned is, and we even talked about it in the last one, like the 5 pillared colonnades. This is the books of Moses. And no, the 5 barley loaves are not Moses. And they're barley because they're coarse and they're rough, and they are the embodiment of the law. But you must get the kernel out of the husk, and that kernel is Christ. Cyril of Alexandria. That kernel that comes out of the husk of the law of Moses is the good fruit of Christ. And it's like, I think they were just barley loaves too, right?
It's good beer.
And so, I mean, sometimes it's pretty mundane, and you might be thinking, you're doing too much. But other times, it can be really profound, the kind of things that they pull out. And you gotta kind of parse through these things when you're dealing with early church stuff.
I've got a perception that since we've been reading through some of this, and it keeps referring to Jesus as a prophet.
Right.
Do you think the Jews don't see him as a savior because they keep saying he's going to be a prophet?
So part of it is what we've just been talking about here with this. When they say he's the prophet, and this happens on the cross too, is he right? Who do you say that I am? And someone will say, well, you're John the Baptist, or you're Elijah, and it's like. So some of this prophet talk is messianic in nature, because they're recognizing that he is messianic. So there's this riddle that runs its way through the Old Testament And Hebrews deals with it, the book of Hebrews. We have kind of three seemingly competing messianic prophetic lines for the Messiah. You know all of these. These are the three offices of Christ, if you know that phraseology. The one that we're hitting on here is the prophet. Right? He is the new Moses. Prophet, priest, and king, right? And part of the problem of the Old Testament is you had particularly prophets or kings were putting themselves in the place of the prophets and putting themselves in the place of the priests. This is why Saul gets kicked out. Because God says, no. Only one guy gets to be all of them. And it ain't you, Saul. Right? Only one guy is the prophet of my people, the priest of my people, and the king of my people. Right? And so the people here, when they're going, oh, he's the prophet, they're also pulling in, if he is the prophet, that must mean he's the Messiah. What else do we know about the Messiah? Who else is the Messiah? He's the king. So we need to make him king. There's also, let's not get so high and mighty here. They also don't like the Romans and are just chomping at the bit to overthrow them. Like, that is very much a reality in the background here. But I think the way John is ordering this is the people are recognizing this kind of thing, and they want to make him king not only in well, it is an earthly sense, because they don't have the concept of the eternal kingdom yet, right? Jesus hasn't revealed that to them. But I think they're recognizing that Jesus is Messiah here.
There was an expectation. This is the second time the prophet gets mentioned in John's Gospel.
Mm-hmm.
In chapter 1, they questioned John the Baptist.
Right.
And the first thing John said when they asked, who are you? He says, I'm not the Christ. And so they started.
He said, I'm not the new Moses.
Yeah.
Right?
So the next thing is, are you Elijah?
Yeah.
Because it was Malachi, and then, are you the prophet? He says, no. He keeps declining, and then they say, who are you? And he quotes Isaiah.
Yeah. Because he does identify with an Old Testament prophetic role, and that is, I am the voice of one crying in the wilderness, make straight the ways in the wilderness, or make straight the ways for the Messiah and everything that is. So here's this divine mystery and riddle of the Old Testament. We'll start with the easy half of it. The prophet is after Moses. That's not a problem. We don't have any lineage issues with prophet. Who's the king in the line of? What tribe does the king of God's people belong to? Judah, right? Specifically the line of David. Huge theme. Who does the priest belong to?
Levi.
The high priest of Israel is not only Levi, but it's in the line of Aaron. And it gets reduced down. We go, okay, it's in the line of Zadok and some of these other things. Well, hold on. We got a problem here. Because, Jay, you can only be from one tribe, right? And no, you don't just get to say, oh, well, maybe Joseph was the Judah tribe. Maybe Mary was a Levite. Nope, doesn't count. Because one, Joseph wasn't his dad. So you got that issue there. And Mary is no longer a Levite. If she was, she's now from the tribe of Judah, right? That's how it works. If you marry, you are in that tribe now. So how do we sort this out? Book of Hebrews does this. Hebrews unravels this riddle. Because there's the recognition, well, Jesus is all three. He's prophet, priest, and king. We got the prophet part down. That one's not actually that complicated. The king part, okay. Matthew deals with this one pretty cleanly. He's descended from David. Here's the lineage. The problem then is, okay, if he's descended from David, he is not fit to the priesthood. Cannot be a priest. Cannot purify the sons of Levi, right? So he can't do all of the messianic priest things that the priest is supposed to do. By the way, this is part of the reason why the people get behind the Maccabees so significantly, is because the Maccabees were Levites. There was some thought maybe the Messiah is coming out of this event, right? That's neither here nor there. So how do we solve this problem that Jesus is not a Levite?
You need two Messiahs.
Oh, no.
That was the resolution of the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Oh, it wasn't. Yeah. Like I said, this is something that you had the Levite camp, you had the Judah camp. They did not know, right? Simon Bar Kokhba, I believe, the guy who really ruins things for the Jews in the Bar Kokhba rebellion, gets them like flat out kicked out of Jerusalem for 300 years. I'm pretty sure he was a Levite.
Just, you know how my brain works. It says he was a priest after the order of Melchizedek.
Yes.
Was
Oh,
Melchizedek a Levite?
no.
Well,
Who's Melchizedek?
coming to think, maybe it's Jesus. Maybe he's Jesus.
In the Old Testament, who is Melchizedek?
That's what I don't remember.
Yeah.
From the
King
Old
of
Testament.
Salem.
He's Melech, by the way, means king. Salem is, what does Salem mean?
Isn't that like Jerusalem?
It is likely that Salem became Jerusalem.
See, this is the fascinating
Yeah.
stuff. That,
But what does Salem mean? My fieldwork church was Salem, in Salem Lutheran Church in Blackjack, Missouri. Why would you call it Salem? Isn't that where we burned witches? Why was Salem called Salem? What does Salem mean? You know this. What if I pronounced the word differently? Would it help if I, instead of saying Salem, said Shalom?
oh.
Melchizedek's the king of peace.
Oh.
And let's see, Mark doesn't remember where Melchizedek shows up in the Bible. Does anyone else remember where Melchizedek shows up? It's in the book of Genesis.
Yeah.
I Googled it, but I can't spell it.
Yeah, right. ChatGPT. Melchizedek.
It's in Genesis, isn't it?
Melchizedek appears to Abraham and blesses him
Yes.
right after he rescues Lot from not Sodom and Gomorrah, from whatever king nabbed him. It's Melchizedek that comes and blesses him. He's the king.
Priest of I'm sorry.
Oh no, that's good.
The priest of Elion, often translated in God Most High. He is first mentioned in Genesis 14, 18 through 20. Where he gives out bread and wine.
Yeah, Melchizedek is both king and high priest, and he delivers prophetic blessings of God. Melchizedek is a messianic figure. I think Melchizedek is the second person of the Trinity. I think it is. Personally, I think it is a Christophany. Could also just be, in fact, one of the leading theories, and I do also kind of like this one, is that Melchizedek is Shem. As in Noah's son, Shem.
Yeah.
Shem's not dead yet. If you look at the timeline, Shem outlives Abraham. Blew my mind when I learned that.
How would you get Shem?
Because of where Shem is, who Melchizedek is.
Okay.
This is actually the preferred theory of the early church and the intertestamental church, is that's Shem. Luther also prefers that interpretation.
Oh.
Because he's also the one, anyway, he fills that role. Now, again, I think that's nice. I think that would be really interesting. I think it's Jesus. But Hebrews.
Melchizedek?
Yeah, you missed that. I think it's a Christophany. I think this is the pre-incarnate Christ appearing to Abraham and blessing him, which, by the way, now we're going over time, fits the text of before Abraham was, I am, and I blessed him. Before his covenant.
I brought him communion.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Because
That is the only person that Abraham ever receives a gift from is Melchizedek. He refuses gift from Pharaoh, from everyone else. He says, no, I will not be made rich by the hand of anyone else, but except for God, and he receives a gift from Melchizedek. And again, it fits this comment that Jesus makes. I think he was like, I remember when he came hungry, limping out from helping Lot, and I had to help him out, right? And I blessed him, right? And so that's my interpretation. Either way, whoever Melchizedek was, the author of the Hebrews points out, no, he purifies the Levites from the outside, and he makes all of us priests. Peter pulls that out. And so now to be a priest does not mean to be after the order of Levi. It means to be after the order of Melchizedek. He is the high priest ever at the altar eternally, bringing the sacrifices of his own blood, all of that latter hunk of Hebrews stuff. And we are the priests under him who have been made holy by him and have been blessed by him just as Abraham was. This is how the New Testament sorts out this riddle of how do you get a Messiah that's from different tribes. He's not from Levi because he's not a Levitical priest, because that's a priest under the old covenant of the law. He's a priest of the gospel. Melchizedek, he's the priest of peace and blessing. He's the king of all these things. And then the prophet fits in there too. So this is some of what's going on here, a little bit. It was a good jumping off
I
point.
feel like I'm in seminary.
Yeah, right. I mean, good. That's kind of the goal here. But right. So this, when they're saying, "Hey, he's the prophet," that is them saying, "Are you the Messiah?" Okay. That is, or hey, he is the prophet. That is him saying he is the Messiah. Right. That is, it's code. It's not that well hidden code, but it is kind. They wouldn't have seen it as a code. It's like, hey, we're looking for the next Moses.
Right.
This is it. He gave us bread just like Moses brought us manna from heaven. This is it. Right? All right. Wonderful, guys. Yeah, all guys today. And an honorary guest in the back doing crafts.
The button queen?
The button queen who's ignoring us. Thank you. We'll meet next week and we'll see Jesus walking on water. One of my favorite miracles, although it's Mark's version. That's my favorite, not this one. There's no phantasms in this one, I don't think. Anyway, so let's close out today with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, right now.